The most dangerous forms of authority rarely announce themselves as unstable. They appear settled, ceremonial, already resolved. They wear continuity as proof of legitimacy. In early 20th century Europe, power did not look reckless. It looked inherited, it looked rehearsed, it looked complete. Yet beneath the surface of imperial confidence, authority was behaving in a way that suggested not command, but unease. Decisions multiplied, declarations hardened. Symbols were repeated with increasing urgency, as if repetition itself could substitute for certainty. The contradiction was subtle but decisive. Authority was everywhere, yet increasingly unsure of its own weight. What presented itself as strength began to function as reassurance. At the center of this contradiction stood an emperor whose position implied control, but whose presence revealed something else. Kaiser Wilhelm II did not rise through conquest or crisis. He inherited an empire already assembled, already victorious, already convinced of its place in the world. The German state he ruled was young, powerful, and structurally complex. Its authority rested on recent success, military prestige, and the ritual of monarchy. Nothing about its outward form suggested fragility, and yet the system behaved as if it needed constant confirmation. Power was intact, but it no longer rested. Germany's imperial structure had been designed for momentum. Unification had come through decisive wars, through rapid alignment between crown and army, through victories that left little time for reflection. The institutions that followed were layered rather than unified. Civil administration existed alongside military command. Parliamentary bodies operated without full authority. The emperor stood above them all, formally supreme, yet practically dependent on the balance between them. Authority flowed downward, but responsibility diffused outward. Decisions did not pass through a single center. They accumulated. Wilhelm occupied this accumulation. He embodied the empire's authority without fully directing its mechanisms. His presence mattered less for the orders he issued than for the signals he emitted. Uniforms, speeches, gestures, appearances, each carried weight. Each implied alignment. Each substituted symbolism for instruction. The emperor did not need to command directly. His visibility alone was enough to validate motion. This arrangement functioned as long as momentum aligned with restraint. But Europe was no longer a continent of loose space and flexible outcomes. Alliances tightened, borders hardened, military planning accelerated. Germany's central position became a condition rather than an advantage. Pressure arrived from every direction, not as invasion, but as anticipation. Authority no longer acted into uncertainty. It acted into expectation. Wilhelm responded as authority often does when expectation outpaces control. He performed it. Naval reviews expanded. Public declarations multiplied. Germany's global aspirations were articulated loudly, repeatedly, with an emphasis on recognition rather than strategy. Prestige became something to be demonstrated rather than preserved. Each act of display narrowed the room for retreat. Authority learned to fear silence more than escalation. There was no single moment when this shift occurred. It unfolded through accumulation. Each crisis added another layer of expectation. Each diplomatic confrontation reinforced the belief that resolve must be visible. Adjustment came to resemble weakness. Hesitation threatened legitimacy. Authority did not disappear. It hardened. Within this environment, Wilhelm's interventions became inconsistent. At times, he asserted himself dramatically, issuing statements meant to project firmness. At other moments, he retreated, deferring to generals, ministers, or processes already underway. Neither posture restored control. Assertion created obligations. Withdrawal transferred authority without direction. Power oscillated without stabilizing. The German military adapted quickly to this ambiguity. Plans advanced on the assumption of imperial approval rather than its explicit instruction. Mobilization schedules became fixed, not because they were inevitable, but because altering them required a level of political clarity that authority no longer supplied. Civilian leaders hesitated to challenge momentum framed as necessary for national prestige. The emperor's approval functioned less as guidance than as currency, exchanged implicitly, rarely questioned. As Germany pursued parity with established empires, particularly Britain, authority bound itself to material symbols of power. Naval expansion was not merely strategic, it was reputational. Ships represented recognition. Fleets embodied arrival. Each investment committed the empire not only to resources, but to expectations. Authority became entangled with the image it projected. To reconsider direction would have required acknowledging limits that power had already denied. Other states did not respond to Germany's intentions. They responded to its posture. Britain recalculated naval priorities. France reinforced continental alliances. Russia accelerated mobilization planning. These reactions did not require provocation. Authority's visibility invited measurement. Measurement invited alignment. Alignment compressed time. Wilhelm did not orchestrate this compression, but his position amplified it. His public persona carried uncertainty as much as confidence. Allies questioned reliability. Rivals questioned restraint. Authority became a variable rather than an anchor. The system absorbed this variability and compensated by narrowing options. Flexibility gave way to procedure. Procedure hardened into obligation. Crises arrived with increasing frequency. Morocco tested credibility. The Balkans tested alignment. Each episode reinforced the same lesson. Authority that survives by repetition becomes dependent on it. Every time Germany asserted itself without recalibrating outcomes, it reduced the space for future adjustment. Power did not fail. It complied with the logic it had helped create. By the summer of 1914, authority operated within a corridor already defined. Diplomatic language moved faster than deliberation. Military planning outran political clarity. Assurances were offered without precise limits. The emperor alternated between moments of hesitation and confidence, neither of which disrupted momentum. Authority did not decide for war. It permitted escalation. The July crisis did not unfold through decisive command. It unfolded through continuity. Institutions acted in anticipation of approval rather than in response to instruction. Mobilization proceeded because interruption itself appeared illegitimate. Authority's silence carried weight equal to its declarations. The system obeyed the residue of power rather than its guidance. What eroded was not legitimacy, but discretion. Authority remained formally intact, yet increasingly unable to revise the outcomes it enabled. Power functioned as authorization rather than control. War planning advanced because no single figure could clearly halt it without contradicting the image already projected. Authority had bound itself to inevitability. The inward turn reveals itself here. When power sustains itself through affirmation rather than judgment, does it retain the capacity to restrain what it sets in motion? Or does authority, once entangled with its own image, become obligated to fulfill the expectations it has created, even when those expectations exceed its control? Wilhelm remained emperor as Europe descended into war. Authority did not vanish at the threshold of catastrophe. It was consumed by it. The structures designed to elevate command transformed it into obligation. Power continued to exist, but no longer as choice. What remained was motion without direction, legitimacy without leverage, and a system still obeying authority long after its capacity to guide had quietly eroded. If you found meaning here, you're welcome to explore more on Timeless Questions, where we examine history not for answers, but for understanding.